Grant Robertson.
I have heard Hutt Valley High School referred to as Sweet Valley High, but I'm not sure about Technology Valley, is it, Mr. Bishop? Yeah. No, you'll need to go back to the marketing people on that one. Mr. Speaker, I'll give the government this about this tax bill. At least when the Select Committee looked into this bill and took submissions on this bill, we didn't have every large accounting firm in the country come to the committee and say the bill doesn't make sense, they're professionally confused by the government's approach, they don't understand how it fits together, because this bill came through at the same time as the government's legislation around property measures came through to the committee, which was a fiasco. This was where they brought in their bright line test. We had the whole thing about providing an IRD number and an address, and submitter after submitter came and said this does not make any sense. And I'll let the House and those watching in on a secret. There's a reason why this bill stands out from those other ones. This one's got nothing to do with the National Party. This bill comes from the officials at IRD, who do a pretty good job, to be honest, in keeping the tax system running efficiently, picking up the loopholes, picking up the contradictions in the tax law. And they've brought a pretty good bill in that context. But it's because it doesn't have the real paw prints of the National Party on that it's actually come to us in a form that we can vote for it and pass it without those who work every day in the tax system worried that they simply can't understand what the government's up to. And that's the tragedy of this from the government, that when they put their own bright ideas into the tax system, it turns into a shambles. And that means that all we're left with are the mechanics of the system. And as I say, good on the IRD officials, and I want to thank them for their role in supporting the Select Committee, and Therese Turner, the specialist expert advisor that we have with the committee, all did a great job in helping the committee work through the issues that are here. But it's just making the machine tick over. That's all the government's managed here. They've got absolutely no vision for what role the tax system might play in helping New Zealanders build the Kiwi dream, and helping New Zealanders get ahead, take the opportunities that are out there. Where's the vision from this government when it comes to how the tax system can do that? All they've got for us is a mechanistic piece of legislation, because they don't have the ideas that'll help drive innovation, that'll help New Zealanders get ahead, take the opportunities and build the dreams that they have. So, Mr. Speaker, what we've got here in this bill is a piece of legislation that does 4 or 5 major things, and all of them are a disappointment in one way or another. Firstly, there's the setting of the annual rates for 2015-16, which, as Mr. Woodhouse and others have noted, are the same annual rates that we've had. And as my colleague Stuart Nash said, all that does is entrench the inequalities that are in our system already. All that does is say to New Zealanders that the government is bereft of ideas for how the tax system might contribute to perhaps reducing inequality. I think we would all respect the idea that the government needs to pass legislation like this that makes the tax system tick over, if at the same time they were out there having the discussion with New Zealanders about how the tax system could be made fairer, how we could actually look at the role of the tax system in not only income equality, which is obviously what the rates are about, but also asset and wealth inequality. You know, time after time in the Select Committee, we have the Governor of the Reserve Bank come to us and talk to us about how worried he is about what's happening with asset prices in New Zealand. And when we turn that into real life, that's actually people, lots of New Zealanders, lots of young New Zealanders, being shut out of that core element of what we've thought it means to be a New Zealander, the idea that you could own your own home. And that's what we mean by asset inequality over here. When you've got home ownership rates at the lowest that they've been in 60 years, that's snatching that dream away from a whole generation of New Zealanders. Where's the bill that says we're going to do something about that in this House? We don't see that from this government. We see the tinkering. So we see the annual rates saying the same. And lots of New Zealanders will be sitting around tonight, Mr. Speaker, following this bill closely and wondering whether or not this is the bill that will make sure that everyone pays their fair share in the tax system. Well, I can tell them, I've waded through it, I've done the work there for New Zealanders, it's not. This is not the piece of legislation that's going to say every New Zealander should pay their fair share. Where's the bit in here where the government decides to crack down on tax evasion? I know Simon Bridges is worried about this. He's got hard-working New Zealand companies in his electorate in Tauranga who pay their tax. Do the right thing. Well, stand up for them, Mr Bridges. Stand up for them and say those multinationals who hide their income, who shelter away from their tax obligations, stand up for those New Zealand companies and come up with a plan that does that. Don't sit around on your chuff waiting for some international organisation to sort it out for you. Get up and support those companies who do pay their fair share. So we look at the Taxation Annual Rates 2015-16 bill, no sign of that. No sign of any action to actually make sure that the tax system is a fair system where we actually collect the tax that's owed, and we have a system that New Zealanders could say once and for all was fair. So the annual rates are set. They're not set the way that we would do them. My colleague Stuart Nash has made the point that there won't be anyone in this House who wouldn't want to see taxes lowered for particularly those on low incomes in New Zealand. But we can't do that at the moment. We can't do that at the moment because we don't have a system that treats New Zealanders fairly, and too many people get away without paying their fair share. Mr Speaker, as others have said, the other core element of this bill is around research and development, and Chris Bishop's made the point. There are a couple of measures in here that will be helpful, particularly for start-up tech companies and those right at the beginning. There's no doubt that that's true, and again, I congratulate the officials on having come up with that. But it's hardly the comprehensive measure that we need to get research and development going. And every single member on the other side of the House knows that if they've been to Australia or if they've gone to countries in Europe, a simple, straightforward tax credit system for research and development operates there. Now, we can have an intellectual debate about the best kind of system to make that happen, but the truth is, for companies that are operating in New Zealand today, they can look across the Tasman and they can see an R&D tax credit system that's easy and operable. And why not go and work in that system? Because New Zealand is failing to do that. And I mentioned in my committee stage speech going to the low corporation in the Hawke's Bay with Stuart Nash and Andy Lowe saying to us, whatever you do, get that through, because it gives the certainty to those companies that they can claim, in our case the policy the Labor Party has put forward, 15% for R&D tax expenditure. That means they know they can do it. Under this system, we entrench the grant-based system, Stephen Joyce picking winners, Chris Bishop going through his Rolodex deciding who's going to get that R&D grant. We can do so much better than that, Mr Speaker, if we have an R&D tax credit system that is simple, that is easier to use, and that everybody can access. Mr Speaker, though, I just want to end on the question around child support and the simplification of the administration of the child support scheme that is lauded and claimed in this bill. The truth is, what this bill does is put in place some of the mechanisms that are required to implement a $130 million blowout. That's actually what it does. And in fact, it's more than 130 million, Mr Speaker. It's more like about 160 million more than what was originally forecast. This was incredibly poor planning by the government. They went against the advice of Treasury, the State Services Commission and the government's Chief Information Officer, who all said, Taiho, wait until the overall IT transformation package has been put in place. But instead, the government has thrown bad money after bad money, actually, and created a situation in which the child support system, IT system, has now had all this money chucked at it. And I have no doubt, Mr Speaker, at some point the government will come back and say it doesn't quite match with the new IT system. More money will need to go in it. The child support system changes themselves have had difficulty bedding in. I won't be the only MP in this House who've had people come to me with concerns about how that's happened. It is a difficult area. We want to ensure that people meet their obligations, but we have to make sure that people are treated fairly, and ongoing cases indicate that the system the government's put in place is very, very creaky. So, Mr Speaker, it's a missed opportunity. The government could have put forward a tax bill that actually made the tax system fair, made it part of supporting innovation, made it part of supporting a financial system that New Zealanders could be proud of. They've missed that opportunity, as they have so often before.